Hello everyone, I'm back again. This is day 5 of my hackathon. Let's see. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to put gel coat on the inside of this mold. This is mold here. And I'm going to make part of a fender, that eyebrow piece. That's what I'm going to make right now. Somebody asked me to show how to spray PVA, but with the humidity the way it is, it takes hours for it to dry. Normally it takes 15 minutes for the first coat and 30 to 45 minutes for the second. Yesterday it took 2 hours and the mist coat didn't even cure. So what I did last night was I took a brush, smoothed out what was there, because what happened, the moisture in there got into it and it's water based, so it just started running. So I respread it as best as I could with a brush, let it dry completely, and then went in and sprayed it with the PVA spray. So this part is covered real well with PVA. Now this part over here is attached to the whole front end. This thing is unbelievably heavy. I can barely carry this center section by myself. The fenders can be carried, but they're pretty unwieldy. So there's no way in the world I could carry this whole thing or even this half of it. So I had to leave this outside. I put the canvas cover over. But what I found out from the last couple of days with the humidity so high, it doesn't matter. The moisture in the air just falls on here as dew, even if it's completely covered like this, and it makes the PVA run. So sure enough, when I came out here this morning, the PVA had gotten wet, had run off, and it was on the table. There's puddles on the table. So I spread it out as good as I could with a paintbrush, and I'd already waxed the mold. The mold actually was waxed from previously making parts off of this. And so I did apply another coat of wax, I think 2 coats of wax. So as someone said, you don't need to use PVA if you wax it very well. I just hate waxing. So I would rather just spray it on there and let it dry under normal circumstances than to sit there and wax it. Wax on, wax off, that kind of stuff. But in this case, I've got some PVA, I can see it here, and I know it's waxed well enough. The other thing is, someone asked me, why are you using gel coat? Because you're not doing finished parts, and you could just do it in fiberglass, and then when you join the parts together, you don't have to worry about the gel coat and sanding through it and all that. That's true. Let me show you why. And it's 100% personal preference. So I made this mold several years ago. It's of a door for a 53 Corvette. And this is what regular fiberglass looks like when you're done. So you can see it's somewhat translucent, and it's like a semi-gloss surface. I like a glossy surface so that I can see bends and stuff. And in fact, I'm switching from using white gel coat to black next time I buy it, because I can see contours in black much better than I can in white. But anyway, this is what it would look like, and it's not very attractive. So my bottom line is, every piece I make, I want it to look as good as it can. The stuff with the gel coat comes out white. It looks like you just painted it with white paint. So to me, it has a more finished look to it. So I'm willing to take the sacrifice of having to sand through the gel coat. Gel coat sands really easily. I've got a grinder that just eats through it in seconds. So it's not a big deal for me. But he's right. If I wanted to skip steps, I could skip the gel coat. So anyway, that's why. By the way, when you make a mold, you make the part, and then you have to put all this supporting braces so that it's completely secure. Now what I did in this case was I used metal conduit here for the straight pieces, because I wanted to make sure this was flat. And then the curved pieces, I went and got some of the foam that you use to cover pipes, cut it in half, and then I put it along here and then fiberglassed it in place. So I have a very rigid structure here. It's not going to move, it's not going to distort, and I can make many doors off of this mold. Okay, enough of that. All right, here's my gel coat. You want to get, in this case, you want to get no wax gel coat. What it is, gel coat only cures if it is kept away from air. Okay, so when I use this, I'm going to put it down, and then it's going to cure, and the top side will be sticky. It won't completely cure, and that's because it's exposed to air. So if you wanted it to where the gel coat is on the outside, you would get the gel coat with wax. What happens is you put it on, the wax floats to the top, and then when you're done, it comes out to a hard gel coat finish. In this case, I'm going to put fiberglass on it, so it's trapped on this side by the mold, so air can't get to it. It'll cure. Then I'll put it down and let it cure for 2 hours to the point where it's tacky, but if you put your finger on it, you don't get any gel coat on you. And believe me, with this white, it's really easy to tell if you touch it and your finger has any white on it. So you want it to where when it's done and you put your finger on it, there's no white. Okay, next thing. There are gauges that you can use. Thickness of the gel coat's pretty critical. Not critical, but it's important. If you get it too thick, it can crack later. Gel coat's really not made to be very abrasion resistant, flexible. So you want a thin enough coat that it can be flexible. If you get it too thick, it becomes stiff and it'll crack instead of bending. But if you get it too thin, then what happens is when you put the fiberglass on it, the fiberglass attacks the gel coat and it does what's called alligatoring, which makes the gel coat curl up. I have several examples that I could show you later. So you have to make sure it's thick enough, and it has to be thick. I did order the gauge. There's a gauge that you use. You put down the gel coat, you stick it on there and you look at it, and it has 2 probes here, and then it has all these different steps of different heights. And you look for, let's say I want it to be 16 thousandths. There'll be a 4 thousandths. Obviously that one should be covered. There'll be an 8, a 12. And if I want it 16, it should not touch the 16 or barely touch the 16, and that'll let me know I have 16 thousandths. So you would do that, pull it off. Obviously it's going to make a small spot, but a small spot's not a big deal. Okay, another way to do it, and I just set this in fiberglass resin. All of this stuff is messy. You just gotta be careful, or you just have to put up with the fact that you're going to get it on you. Another way to do it is there's an online calculator that says if you've got this many square feet of area you're trying to cover with gel coat, well, this is how much gel coat it should take. And you might have to do conversions from ounces or milliliters or whatever, but it works out. So the hard part with that is estimating the surface area. So on this other side, I looked at it and said, yeah, it's 12 square feet. So I mixed up enough gel coat for 12 square feet. Well, then when I went to put the gel coat down, it would take 3 cups to do 12 square feet. So when I got about the 2 cup mark, from experience, I said, this is the right amount of gel coat, and I've still got another cup left. I went ahead and put it on, which again, I shouldn't have, because it could cause future issues. If it was a final part, I would have stopped and thrown it away. But I figured it's there, I don't want to waste it, so I went ahead and used it. Now, what happened then was when I went to do the fiberglass, I had to cut the material. One of the nice things about buying it in this prepackaged form is this is 8 square feet. So when I open this up and I spread it out and then cut it, obviously it's 2 feet by 4 feet. So the 4 feet came to about here, and then I had to cut another piece to fill in this. By the time I was done, I ended up with that much left. So you know what? That's real close to 8 square feet. And because it's not 100%, rocket science, 8 square feet's close enough. Sure enough, when I looked it up, 8 square feet requires 2 cups of gel coat. So that's a good way to measure things. If you don't want to go spend the money on this, or it's cheaper to buy a whole bunch of this stuff in bulk. I like this because I grab it out, cut it up, and be done with it. Doing it bulk, it comes in a roll, and you have to have some place where you can roll it out and cut it up, so that takes extra space. This I can do 2 feet by 4 feet. I can hold it right here and do it. Again, personal preference. It does cost you a lot more to do it this way, but I don't care. I'm into convenience and speed. Okay, next thing. Oh, so now that I've done this, I know that this is going to take 2 cups. So let me open this up. And like I said, this stuff is messy. It gets on every freaking thing you can possibly imagine. And being white, if you take this and then touch anything, it'll end up white, and whatever it touches will end up white. And just a little heads up that if you have a significant other that cares about such things, make sure you get all of the white off you before you go back to the house. Otherwise, you'll get white on the furniture, which I've done. All right, so I need 2 cups. Next thing, Dollar Tree has cups and measuring spoons for $1.25 each. So I bought a set. I have several sets of these, several sets of these. All right, makes it easy to measure. So I know I need 3 cups. They also have the bigger cups. I usually use those, but it's dirty or somewhere. I lost it in the move and I forgot to get another one. This will work, especially since I only need 2 cups. I had the brilliant idea, or seemed like a brilliant idea, of taking this M&M's container and then marking all of the gradients. There's 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9 cups. In the past, I've been using cottage cheese containers, and I found out that neither the fiberglass nor the gel coat sticks to the cottage cheese. So once it's cured, you can just go in there and you can peel it out and empty it, and it looks like a clean container. I assumed incorrectly that this would be the same way. But if you look at this, you can see that this actually stuck to this. So every time I use this, it loses a little bit of volume because of what's in here. I could chip it all out, but honestly, it's not worth the effort. But it means I can't just pour it in here and go, oh, there's my 3-cup mark or my 2-cup mark and be done with it. I have to actually measure it. Not a big deal. All right. And again, this isn't rocket science. It just has to be close. So there's 1 cup. And there's 2 cups. And again, this would be better if I had a measuring cup that had 2 cups there. When I used the cottage cheese container, I did the same thing. I put the right amount in there, and then I took a Marks-A-Lot and went around the container and marked where that was. So now I just pour it into that mark. But that only holds a couple of cups. So when you fill it all the way up, it's right at the edge, and it's really hard to stir it without making a mess, and I'm trying not to make a mess. When I do this, I get it in here, and then I just take the paintbrush and get out the excess. Okay, so there's my 2 cups. Actually, it's 2 1/4, but again, this is a little bit less than 8 feet, so it should be close enough. If I have to, I can throw together another quick batch. The other thing you're going to want to do is have something to set everything on when you're done with it, so that you don't make a huge mess. All right, so the fiberglass comes with these plastic protected lid things, like so. Okay, so what happens is it comes in a gallon container. Again, this is how I buy it. It's a lot more expensive to do it this way. It's just more convenient. So this comes on here. It takes 2 of these little tubes of hardener, MEKP, for this. So there'll be 2 of these stuck under here, and then this thing is on top to keep it all together. Pull it off. Makes a great container for holding your paintbrush or spatula. Again, $1.25 spatula. All right. I've got this. Now I've got to put my MEKP. Now, the ratio that I've been using, and again, it's because it's cooler. If it was hot, I would be careful about this. And if I didn't have as much experience, I'd be careful. But in this case, I've been doing this a while, and it's cool temperature. So what it is for every cup of either gel coat or the fiberglass resin, the mixture happens to be the same. It takes 1 teaspoon for every cup. Well, a tablespoon is 3 cups. Okay, so I could just use this. If I was doing 3 cups, I would just fill this up and pour it in there. The other way to do it is, when you look at this, there's gradients marked on here. It takes a little over 22 milliliters of hardener for an entire gallon. So it's marked at 22, it's marked at 11. So you could say, oh, I need 10, so that's roughly 10. Okay, so you could do that. The other thing is, a lot of times, medicine comes in these little containers like this. So I saved these because if you look, some of them are graduated. See, this has 15 milliliters, 10, 7.5. The smallest one's 5. All right, so 5 milliliters would be for a single cup. All right, so since I have 2 cups, I need 10 milliliters. I could estimate this, but I found out by experimenting that it's really hard to estimate because it's almost full with only 2 milliliters because it gets bigger and that extra one. So if you try to fill this 2/3 full, it would not be correct. You'd actually not be putting enough hardener in. Okay, so I'm going to take this out. The third way is that there is an actual container that you can get, and I have it. I just have lost it in the move. It'll show up. And it's a squeeze bottle, so you squeeze it, you fill it with MEK, squeeze it, it puts it into a second container, and then you measure it off of there and just pour it from that second container. Much better way to do this, but again, I can't find it. All right, so this just happens to be, oh, the other thing that's interesting about this is the measurement is actually with it upside down. So there's the 11 right there. Okay, so it's 11, let's say 13, I'm guessing 13 milliliters. So I would do this until it's like down to the very bottom if I wasn't using a separate container, but I would trust a separate container much more. So I've told it up to the light. Previously I took a Sharpie and marked these, highlighted it because these stick out. So, but the problem is MEKP takes off Sharpie. Not that you want to do it that way because the stuff is nasty. I'm pretty chemical resistant. I've been around chemicals all my life. MEKP actually I'm not resistant to. It burns. It doesn't burn my hands, but if I get it on any other part of my skin, it burns. Okay, I should be doing this on a level surface instead of like I'm doing now. But again, I've been doing this for a while, and okay, I actually want it a little bit hot. What that means is I really want a little more hardener than it should take theoretically. Reason why is because it is cool, and I want it to cure quickly because I'm impatient. All right. So if I look, sure enough, there's just a little bit of MEKP left in the bottom of this tube. So I've got this here saying I'm about right, that saying I'm right. All right. So I pour it in to my Gelcoat. A word of warning, the second you pour it in here, it's starting to cure. Okay, so that's why I have everything laid out ahead of time. Normally, when I was starting this, I couldn't do a video like this because it would be curing while I was talking and I wouldn't know what to do, or I'd get behind. All right. The other thing is when you stir it, make sure you get it off of the edges. You don't want to end up to where there's any of this that's not mixed, because it will never cure if it doesn't have any hardener. Okay, so I take it from the outside. That's why I use a spatula. Okay, I go all the way around the perimeter. I push it all towards the center. I come up underneath it. Again, I just try to do everything. They make mixers, but that would require me to have my drill, which I have, and hook it up here and do all that. And it's not necessary. Okay, so that's probably good enough. You want to get it mixed, but you don't want to take too long because, like I said, it is curing. The MEKP doesn't seem to be as critical about curing fast. The resin is. The resin, it starts curing, and if you don't get it mixed in time, it starts gelling and you can't spread it out. All right. Okay, so the other thing is I just want this area here. On this one, I had marked it with a Sharpie. I forgot to mark this one. So I only want to put this on the area that I'm going to be covering, which was the little less than 8 square feet. You do not want to brush this stuff on. Any thin spots that you get are going to alligator on you. Okay, so what happens is if I put the brush on here, that's the thickness it should be. If I brush it again, I just drew some of this material away and actually made it too thin there. I learned this from experience. So it's hard to do because you're so used to painting where you put some paint on and then you spread it around and make it look all pretty. You don't want to do that. Okay, so literally every time you touch the brush to the surface, in between, you want to dip it in the container. So I would say you're more blobbing it on than painting it on. It's a little difficult to do around edges and stuff. Okay. So same thing here. And as I do this, I look, even blobbing it, I still get thin spots. So I look for those and say, oops, there's a thin spot there. Now, the advantage of having measured the surface area and the amount of material I'm putting on, I know that this container is supposed to be empty when I get this on at the right thickness. So again, it's kind of a sanity check. I could use that tool and measure thickness if I had it. It's on order. It'll probably be in today, but I don't need it. I've been doing this for years without it. It was one of those, one of these days I'll order that, and yesterday was finally the day. Okay. Now, of course, you're going to have it puddle thicker, like in this area, because of gravity, it's going to run down. Again, it's not that critical, and especially there, because that area is not going to flex as much. It's this area over here that's going to flex a lot. And if you have thick fiberglass on the back, it's going to be less likely to flex. And what happens is fiberglass does the same thing. It gets thick through the center section, so that center rib is going to be very stiff, so it's not likely to flex. Therefore, the gel coat's not likely to flex and much less likely to crack. It's these areas out here that are more likely to flex and crack the gel coat if you put it on too thick. Almost done. Okay, I've covered the whole surface area, blobbing it on. I still have this much left. So theoretically, this needs to go on here somewhere. So now I'm just looking for areas that might be thin. And when I do this, I'm very lightly touching the brush to the surface because I don't want to pick up gel coat. I'm also, again, dipping it in every time. Now you'll notice the back surface, I don't know if you can see in the camera, the back surface is not nice and smooth and pretty. It doesn't matter because I'm going to put fiberglass on this. So what's going to happen is the fiberglass is going to be thicker and thinner in some areas, but again, it's not critical. So the fact that this isn't a nice pretty surface doesn't matter. If you were doing gel coat the other way, where you were using the wax and you were doing this where the outside surface, obviously I would care a whole lot because this looks terrible. Okay. Also, people recommend spraying it. I'm lazy. I hate cleaning spray equipment, probably worse than I hate waxing. So I don't use spray equipment unless I just absolutely have to. And this is one of those cases where a brush works just fine because the surface is not that critical. And again, you'll learn how to do a light touch when you do this so that you're not taking gel coat off. You're actually adding it every time you do it. And what you have to watch out for is where you very first touch it and where you very last touch it, because those are the areas that are going to end up thinner. Okay? Because I dip it every time, where I first touch it isn't likely to be thin, but where I touched it last is likely to be thin. The other thing is, don't try to touch up the gel coat after the fact. I've tried that. It just ends up screwing it up. In fact, it ends up pulling more gel coat off the surface. So I'll fix a spot where I see it's thin, and then what happens is surrounding that area ends up being just as bad, and so I still end up with alligatoring. So I've learned, apply it liberally, and once it's there, leave it alone. All right, I'm almost finished with this. And again, I'm just estimating. I'm looking at it going, yeah, I think it could use a little more here. So honestly, at this point, I would say I'm done. And sure enough, I mean, I can sit here and scrape a little more out of it. Again, if you have one of those gauges, now would be the time I would take that gauge, stick it on there, and see which one of the little tabs has gel coat on it, and say, oh, my thickness is 16 thousandths or whatever the heck it's supposed to be. Okay. But in my case, like I said, since they've calculated it for me, and it says if you've got 8 square feet and you use this much, then it's automatically going to be the right thickness. That's how they come up with that number. All right. Now, even though it doesn't matter, I do try to get it smooth, even, because it cures. The speed at which it cures depends on how thick it is. If you have it really thick, it cures by generating heat. So if you left it in this container, it would cure a whole lot faster than it would spread out like this, because the extra volume creates extra heat, and it just is like kind of takes off in a chemical reaction. Okay. The other thing people said about putting it on thick is it'll sag. So you can see that right here, it's sagging a little bit. But again, because this is inside and it's going to be covered up by fiberglass, I simply don't care. But if this were an external surface, I would care. So that 16 thousandths or whatever the number is, actually is the amount that you can put on without it sagging if you did it evenly. So again, that number is more critical in other applications or other situations than what I'm doing here. And as it starts to cure, you'll see that when I put it on here, it's getting tacky a little bit, not a lot. It never does get really, really tacky, but it's a little bit tacky. So when I spread it, when it's very fresh, it self-levels. I put it on there and it just kind of finds its own level, smooths itself out. The more it cures, the less it smooths itself out. All right, in all honesty, I should have stopped doing this, but I'm just that way. If I got it, I'm going to use it. But again, if this is your first time or you're new at this, don't do this. Once you reach the point that it looks like it's done and it's down and it's even, stop. Just throw the rest away. It's not going anywhere, and the damage you do trying to use the extra is going to be way worse than throwing a little bit of material away. Just so you know, this stuff is $90 a gallon, so it's not cheap. Oh, and they also make it in black. I just found that out. Unfortunately, I also just ordered a whole nother gallon of white. So after this, I'm going to switch to black. I tried coloring it. If you watch that video, that didn't work so well. The white is so opaque that when you try to put any color in it, it makes it into a pastel color. So you could end up with, if you use blue, you'd end up with baby blue. If you use yellow, you'd end up with lemon yellow. If you use red, you end up with pink. And I tried to get orange, and it ended up with this pukey, pinkish, orangish thing. So anyway, I always try new stuff. That was one of those things that's like, okay, so now I have tint that is absolutely useless unless I want some pastel colored gel coat, which I doubt I will. All right, I'm finally calling it quits. See, I have gel coat on me. Alcohol takes it off if it's fresh. Once it cures, it doesn't take it off. The other thing that works even better than just plain alcohol is the hand sanitizer, because it has alcohol in it with a gel, because the alcohol just runs right off my hands. The gel makes the alcohol stay, and so it gets a little longer to soak. But even with alcohol, you can see I've been rubbing this. I should have paper towels out here. I don't. not a big deal. I will go clean this off before I go in the house, because again, I don't want this white all over stuff. All right, I think that's got us covered. My next challenge is to turn off the camera without getting gel coat on it. So that'll be a challenge. So now all I can do is wait 2 hours for this to cure. You can actually leave it overnight, and it's probably safer to leave it overnight. Again, my alligatoring, I think, is causing some cases where it hadn't cured completely, and then when I put the fiberglass resin on top, the fiberglass attacked this and it caused it to shrink up. That's really critical if you mix your fiberglass hotter than you mix this, because the shrink rate is controlled by how hot you mix it, and so by it being hotter, it shrinks faster. When it shrinks the layer underneath, then of course the outside layer has to shrink, but it's already mostly cured, so when it shrinks, it wrinkles, which is the alligatoring. All right, now I have to get out of here. All right, that's it for today. So like and subscribe, and click that little button there, the alert button, the bell, and you'll know next time I publish a video. Bye.